everybody, my name is Kat, and you are watching Kat by Kindlelight. Today we're here to talk about the 7 books that I have on my TBR for September 2024. I've put all the books into separate chapters so you can jump around at your leisure, but before we get going, I would like to take a few minutes to explain how my TBR works, what it does for me, and how I use it, just so you have some context of how life is for me as a reader, because I think that's always interesting. Anyway, I am somebody who is 2 things as a reader. I am incredibly indecisive, and I am a mood reader. So I have this constant challenge of needing to narrow down the number of books I'm trying to decide between so that I don't spend days trying to choose a book, and also making sure that I have enough options available that when I do go to choose a book that I can pay attention to my current mood. I'm also not a super fast reader, so I'm not someone who puts like 7 books up here necessarily expecting or guaranteeing that I'm going to get to them. And if we're being brutally honest, I'm not somebody who's necessarily going to make myself strictly stick to my TBR. If something comes up that grabs my interest, if there's an event going on, if my mood shifts or anything else, it's entirely possible that I will shift what's going on here. And if a book here does not work for me, it does not work for me. I do not make myself finish books. Anyway, with those things out of the way, let's actually get to the list improper. Starting with book number 1, which is The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. First up, here is the synopsis from Goodreads. The gods love to toy with us mere mortals, and every 100 years we let them. I have never been favored by the gods, far from it, thanks to Zeus. Living as a cursed office clerk for the Order of Thieves, I just keep my head down and hope the capricious beings who rule from Olympus won't notice me. Not an easy feat, given that San Francisco is Zeus's patron city, but I make do. I survive. Until the night I tangle with a different god. The worst god. Hades. For the first time ever, the ruthless, mercurial king of the underworld has entered the crucible, the deadly contest the gods hold to determine a new ruler to sit on the throne of Olympus. But instead of fighting their own battles, the gods name mortals to compete in their stead. So why in the underworld did Hades choose me, a sarcastic nobody with a curse on her shoulders, as his champion? And why does my heart stop every time he says I'm his? I don't know if I'm a pawn, bait, or something else entirely to this dangerously tempting god. How can I, when he has more secrets than the stars in the sky? Because Hades is playing by his own rules, and death will win at any cost. On the off chance that some of you have listened to my newbie tag video, you might know that I am a massive fan of Greek mythology, and I'm also actually a really big fan of retellings or of utilizing characters from myth or fairy tales and doing new and original and fun things with them. There always has to be some kind of hook that draws readers into a story, and utilizing a well-known character from some form of mythological or folklore or fairy tale or something like that, and then having some fun with them can be a really great way to draw readers in. In this case, of course, we are talking about a story where the driving factor is Greek gods, and especially Hades, who happens to be my personal favorite. So of course, I'm super hyped to see what exactly will be going on with that, and to see just what this author will do with him, with the interaction between him and this character, etc. I used to be really stuffy about this, and there would have been a time in my life where I would have been like, you are dishonoring Persephone, but no. Persephone is a complicated character. Sometimes in stories she wants to be there, and sometimes she totally doesn't, and sometimes she starts out not wanting to be there and she changes her mind. It really depends what an author does with the overall mythos. So her being there or not is definitely optional, and it can be really interesting to see in a different context just what Hades would be like paired with somebody that he didn't drag away from a flower field and down into the underworld instead, because I've always personally viewed Hades as a relatively sympathetic character. I mean, yes, he's got a very difficult and complicated job, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily and instantly mean that he is intrinsically a bad person. I mean, one of the jobs that Hades has within the concept of mythology is being the leader of the underworld, and therefore at least partially responsible for the concepts of like justice and stuff like that. So I mean, obviously there has to be some level of decency there, because otherwise it wouldn't function. But those are just my 2 cents on Hades, which came up because of this overall premise. I also like the idea that this story seems to be centered around some kind of test or challenge or series of things that the characters in it are going to have to undertake. I really love this kind of concept for a book. It's something that can tend to make a story move a lot faster, and that can definitely add a lot of tension, a lot of excitement, a lot of drama. And a good thing about that, in my opinion, is that while I'm sure there will still be certain levels of questioning and tension and other things in regards to the potential romance that we see promised here, it also means that there is other areas of the story for the author to put that kind of conflict engine into, which is a good thing, because when all of that ends up being weighed down on the romance, it can really mess a love story up, and it can make it a lot harder for me to empathize with the characters and to understand why they want to be with each other so badly, which isn't what you want from me if you're trying to buy me into following your romance. I realize also that this is a series, so we are probably going to get some bits and bobs that are going to be dangling by the end of this. Who knows how crazy the ending will be, whether we'll get something that can relatively stand on its own or whether it'll be some massive cliffhanger. We're going to have to wait to see. But the fact that I'm interested in this, at it being 592 pages, is pretty impressive, because my September TBR for my reading speed is already super loaded as it is, but I absolutely could not resist adding this, despite the fact that it's thick enough that I could use it as a door stopper, okay? So I definitely am kind of having a chuckle at that. But overall, I am really, really excited for this book. This is the book I am highlighting on my blog as my September pick of the month. It is the book I am probably the most eager to read. It's very close with the next book I'll be talking about, but that's beside the point. And I'm definitely looking forward to sitting down with this when it releases on September 3rd, going through it and starting to share my thoughts. Anyway, I would love to know if any of you are looking forward to reading the games Gods Play, because I would love to chat with you about it in the comments. Moving on to book number 2, we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith, which is also releasing on September 3rd. The summary from Goodreads goes as follows. Welcome to Phantasma. There are only 2 rules to the game. Stay alive, and don't fall in love. When Ophelia's sister disappears, there is only one way to save her. Ophelia must enter Phantasma, a deadly contest inside a haunted mansion, and claim its prize, a single wish. Phantasma is a maze of twisting corridors and lavish ballrooms, of demons and temptations. Ophelia will face 9 challenges, each more dangerous than the last. There can only be one winner, and the other contestants will stop at nothing to eliminate their rivals. Every day the house creates new monsters. But just as Ophelia's fears threaten to overwhelm her, a mysterious stranger offers her a bargain. Charming, arrogant, and infuriatingly attractive, Blackwell claims he can guide her through the lethal trials ahead. All he asks in return is 10 years of her life. Ophelia knows she shouldn't trust him. Blackwell doesn't seem dangerous, but appearances can be deceptive. Worse still, she feels a dark and irresistible attraction, drawing them closer and closer. Her life is on the line. But in Phantasma, the only thing deadlier than losing the game is losing your heart. All he asks is 10 years of her life. Oh my, what a charmer. How generous. How Clarence Clavicle Moundshroud. Do any of you know about the Halloween tree? Now, let me make something abundantly clear. That is not a character you want to romance. That is a creepy old man, but it is the only time I can think of in fiction that I've actually gotten deeply involved in, where a character has made some kind of deal with other characters for a portion of their lives to save somebody. And it's one of the most memorable things I can recall hearing about in a story. It's something that has stuck with me so strongly and so profusely that I watch the Halloween tree every Halloween without fail, just as unerringly as I would watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It's that important to me. So when this guy wants not 1 year apiece from 4 different people, but 10 years of this young woman's life to help her go through these trials, I was already interested as I listened to other parts of the story being described in the blurb. But when I got to that part, I'm like, I have to read this. Like, I want to know, why does he want that? And I mean, does he mean that he wants her with him for some reason for 10 years? Meaning that she would be in his proximity, at his beck and call, etc.? If it's that reasoning, why does he need that? I mean, apparently he's already handsome and charming and she's already attracted to him. So that's kind of weird. Is it, instead of something like that, a situation where a part of her life force is going to be siphoned, akin to what we are talking about with the Halloween tree example, where he's coming back to collect it at the end of their lives, like they've all shortened their lives by a year? Is it something like that? Or is it something I'm not even seeing? Is it for some kind of ritual? Is it to put that life into some necromantic creature? There are any number of possibilities that could be going on here. And the fact that I don't know what it is just makes me want to find out all the more. And then, as we saw with the games gods play, we also see here that there is some kind of set of trials, of tests, of challenges going on. There are people competing for a prize. And when people are competing for a prize, and I've never done something dangerous like this. I've only done like competitions like music and stuff. But let me tell you, when people think they can get something by winning something, some people get brutal. So when it's a situation like this, where it is an unidentified wish, where it's something that could potentially be infinite, that's only going to make that kind of behavior go up. So I'm definitely very intrigued by this book. I definitely want to read this. I love the idea that it's in this haunted house and stuff, because that definitely adds to the overall fall vibes and starts getting us moving in the direction of Halloween, which I will be looking forward to in October. And I think it's really cool, and I wanted to get to it because it is coming out in September, and I want to make sure that I check it out. I like trying my best to get to new releases when they come out so that I can share my thoughts and help other people find them. So I'm definitely looking forward to diving into this book and into this overall world and getting all my questions, hopefully, answered. So, are any of you looking forward to reading Phantasma? I would love to know, so if you are, drop a comment and we can totally chat about it. The third book on my TBR is An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson, and it will be releasing, according to my research, on September 17th. The description for this book on Goodreads goes, Lennon Carter's life is falling apart. Then she gets a mysterious phone call, inviting her to take the entrance exam for Drayton College, a school of magic hidden in a secret pocket of Savannah. Lennon has been chosen because, like everyone else at the school, she has the innate gift of persuasion, the ability to wield her will like a weapon, using it to control others and, in rare cases, matter itself. After passing the test, Lennon begins to learn how to master her devastating and unsettling power. But despite persuasion's heavy toll on her body and mind, she is wholly captivated by her studies, by Drayton's lush, moss-draped campus, and by her brilliant classmates. But even more captivating is her charismatic advisor, Dante, who both intimidates and enthralls her. As Lennon continues in her studies, her control grows, and she starts to uncover more about the secret world she has entered into, including the disquieting history of Drayton College, and the way that her mentor's tragic and violent past intertwines with it. She is increasingly disturbed by what she learns, for it seems the ultimate test is to embrace absolute power without succumbing to corruption. And it's a test she's terrified she's going to fail. There is so much here that has me intrigued. First off, the idea that we have a character who is going to some kind of school that is not your average typical college teaching the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic, but instead is going to be teaching her about the use of some special supernatural ability that she has to persuade people. Next up, of course, is the idea that it seems there is a possibility that she could potentially lose herself to these powers and to the idea of becoming corrupt and losing her ability to really determine right from wrong and to have control over whether she is using these powers or they are using her, whether through their own means or through other people manipulating what she can do with them, especially considering that all of these characters seem to have some form of manipulative capability through persuasion. And if that means that not only can they persuade, but that they could hypothetically persuade each other, it's going to be a race to see who exactly ends up getting to exert the correct level of influence to get what they want. There's also the possibility of whatever is going to end up happening with regard to her and this character named Dante, which is definitely intriguing. It's a little bit questionable given that it seems like he has some kind of authoritative position in regard to her. We'll have to see how that goes. That may or may not work for me, but I like that name. I like the overall concept. I am definitely curious just what will actually happen there. But I'm so glad that I found this book because September is a time of year where I really love the idea of going and seeing characters inside of schools that are doing various things that are unique and interesting. I mean, I grew up with Harry Potter. I love the House of Night series, that sort of thing. So anywhere that people are going to a school that is a little bit more unconventional. Not necessarily just like a YA set in a high school doing a contemporary thing, which is fine, but it's not what I'm looking for here. So it'll be fun to see exactly what this ends up being. For clarification, I do not think this is YA given the age of the character, just to make sure there was no confusion. But I think this will be an interesting read, and it's definitely one that I want to check out. Are any of you planning to read An Academy for Liars? I'd love to know, so feel free to let me know if you are, and we can chat about it in the comments. And that's it for new releases. Now moving on to book number 4, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. And the description on Goodreads goes, a magical island, a dangerous task, a burning secret. Linus Baker lives a quiet, solitary life. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old records. As a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth, he spends his days overseeing the well-being of children in government-sanctioned orphanages. When Linus is unexpectedly summoned by extremely upper management, he's given a curious and highly classified assignment. Travel to Marzier's Island Orphanage, where 6 dangerous children reside. A gnome, a sprite, a wyvern, an unidentifiable green blob, a Were-Pomeranian, and the Antichrist. Linus must set aside his fears and determine whether or not they're likely to bring about the end of days. But the children aren't the only secret the island keeps. Their caretaker is the charming and enigmatic Arthur Parnassus, who will do anything to keep his ward safe. As Arthur and Linus grow closer, long-held secrets are exposed, and Linus must make a choice: destroy a home or watch the world burn. An enchanting story, masterfully told, The House in the Cerulean Sea is about the profound experience of discovering an unlikely family in an unexpected place, and realizing that family is yours. In all seriousness, I can tell you guys there was going to be a book by TJ Klune on here regardless of what happened. I ended up deciding on this one when I talked to my boyfriend, trying to tiebreaker it somehow. He took one look at the 2 different blurbs and was like, Kat, there's a Were-Pomeranian. You have to read this. And so, of course, we are reading this because over on Steam, my little icon for my account is Missile the Pomeranian from the old DS game Ghost Trick. So, yes, Were-Pomeranian, we are absolutely here for that. This is an orphanage rather than a school, but the idea of these different and unique characters all being together and all hypothetically being combined into some kind of found family is an incredibly endearing and enticing idea as far as something that's going to grab my attention. What kind of interconnection are we going to see between these two male characters who are going to be presumably working together for the safety and continued stability of these children? That's going to be interesting. I believe, now please correct me if I'm wrong, this book also labels itself with LGBTQ+ themes inside of it, so we may well see something go on with these two to an extent, which could be very interesting. We'll see about that though. I'm mostly interested in just how unique and different the children described here are, and it'll be interesting to see what kinds of dynamics and interactions they actually have with each other, because they definitely don't seem to be following any rhyme or reason in what they are, and considering that they're all of different species, and that they're dealing with humans on top of that, it'll be interesting to see just what kinds of mischief and other things they could potentially get up to, just based off of that aspect of their reality. I also hope to see just what kind of warmth and bond and connection that all of these characters will form together, and what it will be that will hopefully compel the leading character to actually become part of this family rather than turn them in out of any kind of fear or concern for society at large. The idea that somebody would theoretically need to choose between the smaller and more compact and more intimate and personal aspect of an actual family unit, regardless of whether it's connected by blood, or do what is considered the right thing in order to preserve the world at large, is definitely a conflict and a conundrum that I can get behind. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading this one. This has been out for a while, so I'd love to know if any of you have read it, and if you have any thoughts, feel free to share below, or maybe you're like me and you haven't read it yet and it's on your TBR this month too. I'd love to hear that. Either way, feel free to drop a comment below, and let's move on to book number 5, which is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. The Goodreads description for this one says, after a lifetime of bounties and bloodshed, Viv is hanging up her sword for the last time. The battle-weary orc aims to start fresh, opening the first ever coffee shop in the city of Thun. But old and new rivals stand in the way of success. Not to mention the fact that no one has the faintest idea what coffee actually is. If Viv wants to put the blade behind her and make her plans a reality, she won't be able to go it alone. But the true rewards of the uncharted path are the travelers you meet along the way. And whether drawn together by ancient magic, flaky pastry, or a freshly brewed cup, they may become partners, family, or something deeper than she ever could have dreamed. In traditional fantasy, it is often commonplace that we hear about stories where a band of heroes are tasked with completing a seemingly impossible series of tasks in order to save the world. What we don't hear about nearly as often is what that world that they are trying to save is truly, deeply, and intimately like. We do not really see the comings and goings of the innkeeper, the trials and tribulations of the person who runs the spell shop, the day-to-day motions of somebody who is working to pour ale or coffee or any of that sort of thing. So the idea that there is this new and emerging subgenre called cozy fantasy, where these things actually take center stage, and the lives of the fantasy people that are usually in the background become the center focus, almost as though fantasy trappings are potentially being blended with like contemporary issues, is an interesting idea. I mean, somebody trying to run their new business, or have a family, or move to a new town, or find love just in a casual setting as opposed to in a world-ending apocalyptic quest isn't usually something we see or hear a lot about in a fantasy setting, and it makes you wonder why. So when I heard about this book a few years ago, I was intrigued, but I wasn't really in a reading mood at the time. I had other things going on. But when I decided that I wanted to start this channel, this is one of the books that just kept popping into my head over and over again. Oh yeah, you need to go back, you need to read this one. So I'm definitely looking forward to having it on my TBR for this month. September is such a warm and cozy month. You still have some of the heat of summer, and people are moving into fresh new aspects of their lives. At least up here where I am in Canada, this is actually when we start school. So that sort of thing is going down, and the leaves are changing, and the mood is shifting from the beach parties and warmth and that kind of thing of summer into the more cool and autumnal tones, but we haven't gotten quite to the darker undertones of Halloween or to the chill that permeates the air in November. So it's just this interesting in between, and it just felt like the perfect time for a book like this. So as always, I would love to know if any of you have read Legends and Lattes, whether you had any thoughts on it, whether you know anything more than I do about this whole cozy fantasy thing, if you have any thoughts on that. But that's enough on that topic. Let's jump on to book number 6, which is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer, with the Goodreads summary saying, Assistant wanted. Notorious high-ranking villain seeks loyal, level-headed assistant for unspecified office duties, supporting staff for random mayhem, terror, and other dark things in general. Discretion a must. Excellent benefits. With ailing family to support, Evie Sage's employment status isn't just important, it's vital. So when a mishap with Rendon's most infamous villain results in a job offer, naturally she says yes. No job is perfect, of course, but even less so when you develop a teensy crush on your terrifying, temperamental, and undeniably hot boss. Don't find evil so attractive, Evie. Just when she's getting used to severed heads suspended from the ceiling and the odd squish of an errant eyeball beneath her heel, Evie suspects this dungeon has a huge rat, and not just the literal kind, because something rotten is growing in the kingdom of Rendon, and someone wants to take the villain and his entire nefarious empire out. Now, Evie must not only resist drooling over her boss, but also figure out exactly who is sabotaging his work, and ensure he makes them pay. After all, a good job is hard to find. This had me from the title alone, and as I read the blurb for it and found out a bit more about it in general, I just got more and more excited. I am somebody who absolutely, utterly, 100% loves anything that relates to the concept of villain romance. It doesn't mean that every book like that is going to work for me, but the overall premise that you think somebody is a certain way, and you think you know why they are a certain way, and you think you know what to expect from them and everything, and then certain aspects of their personality shift while certain ones stay put, and you never know from story to story which of these will be which, as these two people end up caring about each other. That is just such a fascinating dynamic to really deal with, because the idea of what it means to be a villain, of course, isn't actually determined by the villain themselves. The determination of a villain is determined by somebody who is already in opposition to that person, which means that the person who is being called a villain may or may not, in the discretion of a third party, e.g. us as the reader, actually be a villain at all. And it can be really interesting to see where a story like this will go, because sometimes you'll see something like this happen and the person will actually do things that would count as villainous. Sometimes you'll see this happen and you'll find out that the people that were labeling themselves as the good guys and that you were initially taught to trust and believe in are actually a bunch of jerks. So there's definitely a lot to work with here. Another thing that I like about this, much like I was saying about Legends and Lattes in the last thing I was talking about, is the idea that this seems like it's a much more chill, much more laid back experience, which usually isn't the kind of angle that you get from like Supreme Evil or something like that. So that's going to add, I think, a good pinch of humor to the whole thing. What I can tell you guys is that I actually have read the sample for this on Kindle, and the only reason I didn't jump right into it was because I decided to read Fourth Wing instead. I was just in a different type of mood. So I knew I wanted to read this, I just didn't know quite when it was going to be, and I think that this month will definitely be a good time to jump in on that, because this looks like something fun and light and easygoing, and that it'll make a nice addition to this overall TBR that I'm setting up here. As always, have any of you read Assistant to the Villain? Do you have any thoughts on it? I'd love to know, so feel free to leave a comment below. And finally, moving on, we have book number 7, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. With the summary from Goodreads being as follows. When 19-year-old huntress Feyre kills a wolf in the woods, a terrifying creature arrives to demand retribution. Dragged to a treacherous magical land she knows about only from legends, Feyre discovers that her captor is not truly a beast, but one of the lethal immortal fairies who once ruled her world. At least, he's not a beast all the time. As she adapts to her new home, her feelings for the fairy, Tamlin, transform from icy hostility into a fiery passion that burns through every lie she's been told about the beautiful, dangerous world of the Fae. But something is not right in the fairy lands. An ancient, wicked shadow is growing, and Feyre must find a way to stop it, or doom Tamlin and his world forever. From best-selling author Sarah J. Maas comes a seductive, breathtaking book that blends romance, adventure, and fairy lore into an unforgettable read. This is one of those books that came out in that great big span of time where I wasn't really actively and focusedly reading, and where I've come back and it's like, oh crap, I haven't read this yet, and there are going to be people undoubtedly down the road who will ask me what I think of it, so it's like, well, I better read this one at least so I have an opinion on it one way or another. Now, the good news, I suppose, is the fact that I did read the first book in Sarah J. Maas' other series, Throne of Glass, and I did like that, but that was one of the last things I read really actively. That was a long time ago, so I haven't really kept up with that series, and I didn't start this one, although I did buy this for my Kindle several years ago, and I just didn't get around to reading it, which is kind of surprising. I'm kind of mixed on this overall, because on one hand, the overall premise of a girl being taken from her home and going to a new place and basically paying consequences for something she did, which in her own perspective was the right thing to do, but in the perspective of those clearly stronger than her was obviously not, is definitely interesting. At the same time, I've never really had a lot of luck with the Fae as far as being a story creature that I've gotten really into. I think the best representation I've ever seen for them was in the anime The Ancient Magus Bride, which is really cool, by the way. If you haven't watched that, please go watch that. It's amazing. But that's probably my favorite interpretation. Now, I did read The Iron King and The Iron Daughter back in the day, and those were alright. But, as I said, for the most part, Faye and I we've never gelled. I'm usually more of a vampires or demons kind of girl. So we'll see how this goes. I think the overall premise and setup sound promising. I know there are a bunch of other books in this series if I do end up enjoying this. So let's just cross our fingers and see how things go down. Anyway, I'd love to know if you've read this and what you thought of it, so feel free to share a comment if you'd like to. And let's wrap this whole thing up. That is all of the books that I am planning to read in September. We'll see how many of them I actually get through. I have no set priority on which ones I'm going to read. The only deciding factor, of course, will be that 2 of these release on the 3rd and 1 releases on the 17th. Other than that, I am free to go in any order that I choose. But this is just my TBR. I'd love to know what you guys are reading this month. So if you would like to tell me in the comments, feel free, or if you've done a TBR video, feel free to point me in that direction and I will happily go and check it out. Anyway, thanks so much for watching my video and have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye!